It's an absolute pleasure to extend a hearty welcome to each one of you present here at this lecture series, episode 6 on legal research methodology. We are thrilled to witness such an enthusiastic participants and a highly learned audience gathered to deepen their understanding of legal research methodology. We are fortunate to have Dr. Professor P. Vanangamudi sir, former Vice Chancellor of Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University, back again to lead this lecture series. Sir, bringing invaluable expertise and insights that will indeed make our exploration of legal research methodology and a fruitful and enriching experience. We welcome you, sir. I extend my warm welcome to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Colonel Professor Dr. N. Santosh Kumar, sir. Your presence and support are testament to the importance of this lecture series. And a special welcome to our Dean, Professor Dr. V. Balaji, sir. And I also welcome Registered Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh, ma'am, and our PG Director, Professor Dr. Kumudiratna, ma'am, and our faculty convener, Dr. N. Anparasi, ma'am, and all and the faculty members and students who are present here. It is an intellectual journey so far. We hope It is an intellectual journey so far. We hope that the seminar will offer an attendee a plethora of insight, enable a fruitful interaction, and inspire a fresh perspective about the legal research methodology. Before we hop into the today's lecture, let us make a moment to review the key points of our previous session. Sir explained about the types of legal education in the first episode and about subjective and objective research in the second episode, types of research and the level of objectivity in the third episode, introduction about the types of validity, valuable insights in the legal research in the fourth episode, and review of literature and the research gap in the fifth episode. Our sir will guide us through the complexity of the research methodologies, shedding light on best practices and emerging trends. The session is handed over to the valuable hand, sir. Over to you, sir.
Good morning to all, and it's my duty to thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Colonel Professor Dr. Santosh Kumar, and all the dynamic deans and directors of the university, and the active participants and the organizers who facilitated to continue this lecture series in a successful manner. At the outset, I have to say today's topic is hypothesis and research in law. There are two concepts, hypothesis and research in law. These two concepts are very pertinent in the present day legal research or research in law. I would like to emphasize one important point. I think it's not out of place. Whenever I used to talk about legal research, scholars used to say, question, is there any such research as illegal research? You are trying to say it's a legal research. So I used to refine the topic, research in law. Every research is a legal research, no doubt. But when we say legal research, we mean to say it is research in law. So hypothesis and research in law may be an appropriate title to have a discussion. In this talk, there are 6 headings. I am interested to have a detailed discussion. One is definition of hypothesis, because research means definition. The definition is a vital concept in every research. Then the types of hypothesis, the second important heading. Similarly, the third one is characteristics of a good hypothesis. Fourth one is variables in research hypothesis. Fifth is measurability of variables. And sixth is necessity to have a hypothesis in legal research. These are the 6 topics we are going to have a detailed discussion. I understand there is an observation from the scholars and the participants that it is a little bit deep concepts, little bit heavier theme, and little bit fast in my deliberations. So I have to modify that one, and I have to go a little bit slow, little bit in detail, and a little bit of space to understand, follow the content. Before going to these 6 headings, the first question is, do we need a hypothesis in law? Just before the commencement of this lecture, the director of legal studies department in the law university, she spoke to me and pointed out, in this artificial intelligence world, it is necessary to do some research in artificial intelligence. And in this context, he pointed out, yeah, artificial intelligence, it's a very important device that is very much useful for legal research also. So one can do in a digitalized era with the help of artificial intelligence, we can do that one. But the basic question as far as in the arena of legal research concern, do we need a hypothesis in all legal research? If so, how to have a hypothesis? It's a big question. As a vice chancellor in those days, I had a critical question in all the PhD vivos. What is the hypothesis? Do we need a hypothesis? Therefore, I feel uh, I can able to guide, enlighten the PhD scholars, master students, and other researchers about the relevance of hypothesis in legal research, and to clearly point out, do we need a hypothesis in all legal research? I'm underlining the word all legal research. My feeling is, my considered opinion is, hypothesis may be required in some of the legal researches or research in law. And some of the legal researches, we don't need hypothesis because of the characteristics of the hypothesis and the types of materials available. Therefore, in this lecture, I'm going to highlight what are the research areas or types of research that will require a hypothesis, and what are the research types or types of research, legal research or research in law, that we need not proceed even without a hypothesis, and the alternate, the equivalent concept called hypothetical propositions. Let me emphasize the word hypothesis and hypothetical propositions. So my lecture, the entire lecture will be relying on these two concepts. The first one is hypothesis, the second one is hypothetical propositions. Before proceeding to that one in depth, I think it is my necessity, it's my feeling to highlight the master students and other research scholars about the relevance of research in law. The basic question is it mandatory to go for PhD in law or any research degree in law? That's a very basic question. My personal feeling is, if you confine yourself only to practice in the High Court or the Supreme Court, there's no need for any master's degree or PhD. If you do master's degree and PhD, your perception, your understanding, your cognitive capacity of understanding law will be very short, will be very critical, and the probability you can win most of the cases better than undergraduate students without proper experience in the court of law. Therefore, widening knowledge is very important, and the widening knowledge the masters and PhD will give. But if you go through PhD in a systematic manner, there are so many other avenues besides having practice. So it's my feeling to highlight what are the advantages of doing research in this one. First point, I would like to say availability of college. If I am interested in doing research, are there colleges to have a registration for PhD? My understanding, I have come across statistics in Tamil Nadu, there are more than 50 colleges. In India, there are nearly 1,500 colleges, if my memory is correct. So colleges are there. Pursuit of PhD is not at all a difficult task at present, because at present there are wide opportunities for registration. So availability of college for the registration is very, very good. The second one is availability of fellowship. People used to say, if you join PhD, minimum it is a prescribed period is 3 years, maximum it is 5 years, it will go on even decades. There are scholars who couldn't complete PhD even after 7, 8 years. It's a difficult task. So in these conditions, availability of fellowship is possible or not. I've gone through the UGC norms and other things. Every year, they are awarding 1,500 fellowships. JRF concern, 1,000 fellowships are being awarded. So once if you get the fellowship of 32,000 rupees per month, I understand now the fellowship is 37,000 rupees at present. With 37,000 rupees, you can do it. The best illustration is I got a PhD I did my PhD in 8085. Without UGC fellowship, I could not do that one. So it is UGC generously funding for scholars. So availability of fellowship is very liberal. So you can pursue that one. So fellowship is there, availability of fund is there. Then the third important aspect is availability of data. As the director of legal research pointed out, artificial intelligence. At present, we have innumerable data. If you are seriously minding about going for a PhD in law, already I suggested that there are 34,000 Supreme Court judgments, and there are 2,200 constitutional bench judgments. There are thousands and thousands of statutes. All these things are available. All these things are available in the digital form. Therefore, thanks to the Honorable Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, everything is available in the digital form. Everything is available in the free of cost. So data is not at all a problem as far as availability of data is concerned. Third one is accessibility of data. So availability is one thing, and the accessibility, the click of the button, you can get a lot of data. Without going to any other place for data collection, you can collect data in the present scenario. So accessibility is also very easy. The only thing is you must know how to get the data through the online or website, all these things. So I don't think it's a very difficult task. You can get it. And the feasibility of completing the work. So in the technological world, if you know the basics or the fundamentals of computer science, you can process the data, you can collect the data, you can edit the data, and you can do it in a wonderful manner. So feasibility of completing the work is also good. And after completing 5 years, my understanding, please, my dear master students, take it from me. It's very easy if you work systematically. I understand 3 years is a maximum period, but you must do it in a committed manner, sincere manner. So after completing the PhD, whether you'll get an appointment or not. So in Tamil Nadu, it is more than 60 colleges, more than at least 50 colleges are there. Almost all the engineering and universities, they are shifting their premises, are shifting their attitude towards law. So they are opening faculty of law. So faculty positions are widely available. So getting a PhD, once if you get a PhD, getting a job is not a very difficult task. Whether you get a job or not, that's the second important thing. But getting a PhD, and that too after applying procedural methodology, if you get a PhD, then wherever you go, you are the most wanted person and you will be recruited. Even if you go for a practice, your approach will be a different approach. So a person who has done a PhD, after going through a systematic methodology course, then his approach to the process of research, problem solving method, everything will be very different and it will be successful. Therefore, pursuing PhD, pursuing a research degree is very useful. It is far useful to the students of law. So, my dear students, please, when you find a very good time, you go for PhD or you go for pursuit of PhD. So this is very important. And that too, for girls, pursuing PhD, having a teacher is a very pleasant job. You can mold the future society. Plato and Aristotle of a Greek philosophical school, they used to say, these two persons, philosophers, and they didn't say as law, they will make the society a different society. They will lead the society. If you want to revolutionize the society, not to teach the students philosophy and law. That way they used to say. So leaders, the freedom struggle, most of the freedom fighters, they are lawyers. Therefore, if you educate people properly, you can have a distinct society that will be a good society. So this is my prelude to, before going to the topic of the day, that is research in law. It is useful, it is good, it is advisable, it is beneficial. With this, let me pass on to the next concept, hypothesis. So, as we used to have a detailed discussion now, whenever we take a concept, it's our procedure to go for it. Etymology. Etymology means root word. So the ABC of research is whenever you come across a concept, you have to go through the etymology of the concept. Suppose if I want to understand a constitution, then go for the definition, etymological definition of constitution. If I want to understand contract, go for the etymological definition of the concept contract. If whatever you want to do in research, the etymology is very, very important. Therefore, as far as this hypothesis concept concerned, etymologically, it's the combination of two words. One is hypo, another word is thesis. So the combination of hypo plus thesis is hypothesis. My dear students, I have come across PhD thesis. They used to commit an error saying this plural form of also hypothesis, they used to say. So hypothesis, SIS is singular, thesis is plural. I had a better experience in my first PhD Viva. The examiner at that time, he raised, what you use the word spelling error is there. One time you are using hypothesis, another place you are using hypothesis. I was correct, but he's an examiner. I have to say, I'll correct myself. So that way I manage because so strategy is much more important in all the aspects. So hypothesis singular, hypothesis is plural. So hypo means, what do you mean by hypo? Hypo means under, less than. It is a prefix. It refers to beneath or below. So hypo means it is below, beneath, under, or less than the normal. Here I have given half a dozen terms, which means the hypo. So examples of hypo, hypoglycemia. And nowadays it is a this sugar. Sugar is a very popular disease. It is most of the people are after 50, 60, they are affected by this glucose issue or sugar. Hypoglycemia refers to low sugar. Low sugar is much more dangerous than the high sugar. So hypo means less sugar or low sugar. And similarly, the next important disease is hypotension. Hypotension is low tension, low BP. So hypo, you may come across, I think it's not out of place to say, 80 to 120 BP sugar level, 80 lowest it must be 80 and highest it must be 120. There is a small variation. We need not go into the technicality. So hypotension, similarly tension, BP level also 80, 120 is the normal one. So this hypo means under, lower, lesser, lower. So low glucose and low tension or low BP, these are hypo. Similarly, there are other words starting with hypo. Hypocritical. We used to say a particular person is a hypocritical. What do you mean by hypocritical? Hypocritical refers to he is thinking of himself too much. His original level is low, but his thinking is high. That is what's called hypocritical. The only popular concept that we come across in law is hypothetical. Hypothetical means I will take it subsequently. Before proceeding to that one, hypothetical refers to imagining the possibility rather than reality. When there is a reality, he is imagining a different thing. That's what's called hypothetical. So hypothetical is less than, hypocritical is less than. Similarly, another very important one is hypothalamus. My dear students, law students, you might have come across in the brain, in the parts of the brain, this hypothalamus is very, very important. So thalamus is a very important part of the brain, and under the thalamus, below the thalamus, there is an organ called hypothalamus. That refers to the region of the forebrain below the thalamus. It's what's called hypothalamus. It is this organism, it's a very important one. So heart rate, whether you are sleeping or dreaming or awakening, whatever be the stage, your heart is regulated by the hypothalamus. Similarly, blood pressure, you are not thinking about your blood pressure. It is regulated by hypothalamus. Similarly, your body temperature, you might have come across body temperature. There must be a minimum temperature or the standard temperature. It is maintained by this hypothalamus. So hypothalamus, it is an organ or it's a part of the human brain. It is under the thalamus. The point I am saying, whenever you come across the word hypo or hypocritical, hypo means less than, lower than, underneath, below. So in the hypothesis, hypo means below. Thesis is another concept. We will take it in the subsequent slides. Please move on to the next slide. In law, the only word, my understanding, I come across this word hypothecation. Most of the autos, they used to have this slide. Hypothesis. This auto is under the hypothecation. Hypothecation means when a person borrows a loan, the lender enters into a contract with the buyer, and accordingly it is under hypothecation. You may come across the legal implication that till the last loan installment is paid, the title is not transferred. When the last installment or some other installment is not paid, the lender the creditor must come and he will take away this property. So hypothecation means offering an asset as a collateral to support a loan. If there is a default on the debtor, the lender will take the asset to recoup the loan money. My point is not to define hypothecation. My point is to define the legal word hypothecation. The prefix of hypo means less than. It refers to lower than, less than. A perfect title is not given. So in this concept only, hypothecation, I have taken it. My dear students, please, we have to be very careful. In law, we are generally using the word prescriptive or prescriptive. Law is a normative science. As it is a normative science, it prescribes you have to do this one and you should not do that one. So prescriptive means prescription of some norms. Prescriptive means not to do certain norms. If you come across penal laws, most of the penal laws it starts with no person shall, no person can. So prescriptive. So prescriptive and prescriptive, these are the two important things. These are the generally either refer to mandatory or prohibitory. So laws are some descriptions of reality, states, processes, actions, and prescriptive obligations or prohibitions. Here, my point is most of the laws, or I can say almost all the laws, they are either prescriptive or prescriptive. They are what's called uh, uh, hypothetical propositions. They are propositions. So law is a proposition, or law has propositions. So there are traces of hypotheses, but all these things are not hypotheses. They are only categorical propositions. So in this context only, I am taking this word hypothesis. Please move on to the next slide. So before going to the next concept, thesis, my feeling is it is my duty to direct my master students and research students. Please have a somewhat a detailed discussion about the uh, propositions. In logic, you may come across there are four categories of propositions, categorical propositions. It is what's called AEIO, universal affirmative, universal negative, particular affirmative, particular negative. So it's not a place to take all these things. If the students are interested, after some time, I'll explain these propositions. So as long as out and out bothering about propositions, it is necessary for students of law to understand propositions and the two types of propositions and the fallacies. What are the fallacies that frequented in all these propositions? So in these four propositions, fallacies are available, and you have to understand all these things in your drafting of the dissertation. Now, let me pass on to the second part of the concept, thesis. So, I am going to submit the thesis, dissertation, all these things. It's a common currency as far as the research is concerned. What is your thesis topic? What is your dissertation topic? So, thesis means it is a proposition. Etymologically, the term thesis comes from the Greek word that means something put forward. I am telling it. I come to this conclusion. It is my proposition. So this is what's called a thesis and refers to an intellectual proposition. So thesis, simply if you want to give an equivalent term, it is an intellectual proposition. What do you mean by intellectual proposition? After a careful study, after a careful understanding, the researcher, he comes to a particular conclusion about a particular statement. That's what's called intellectual proposition. So hypothesis, the second part is thesis. So thesis is a statement or a proposition that is put forward as a premise to be maintained or proved. I am using another concept. It's not my, it's a regular concept. It's a premise. So in logic, in syllogism, you may come across major premise, minor premise, and a conclusion. So premise, to be maintained or proved. A premise is a statement or a proposition from which another statement or fact can be inferred as a conclusion. So the point is, thesis is an intellectual proposition. My dear students, there is a belief that thesis must have 300 to 350 or 400 pages. But if we reduce all these things, the central idea may be given in one sentence or one paragraph. Already I have given an experienced person, he wanted to say the story of Ramayana in one line. Ramayana is a story that is that has been centered around the person or a lady. Pennal Vandadu Ramayana. And similarly, Mahabharatam, experienced person used to say it is Mannal Vandadu Ramayana. It's a land issue, land dispute. Therefore, if you take any thesis, if you are capable of telling the entire thesis in one paragraph, you are a good researcher. So the intellectual proposition I have suggested, that does not mean that is the ultimate fact. In the present day context, even science, they have a question. So in all probability, it is a law, it is subject to be further ascertained. That way they used to say. My point is, thesis is an intellectual proposition. Proposition, it is a statement which has two concepts. The two concepts and their relationships are dealt with. That is what's called proposition. So hypothesis is, please move on to the next slide. Hypothesis means it is a statement that gives with two variables and the variables relationship are dealt with. Please pass on to the next slide. Yeah. So, as the students of law, as we are seriously busy with presenting a case in the court of law or convincing the professors in dissertation or assignment, we are not seriously minding about the in-depth discussion about the hypothesis. Therefore, I have given now a set of definitions about hypothesis. Please look into these these definitions in detailed manner. Even though it's a repetition, I feel it is necessary to have the repetitions to have the clarity. So a hypothesis is a guess. It's a very good point. Simple guess. I guess. The guess predicts something. So hypothesis, a guess or prediction about the relationship between two variables. So the simplest definition is hypothesis is a sentence of words which deals with the two variables and the two variables relationship. The variables which are related, that's what's called hypothesis. So hypothesis is a guess or prediction about the relationship between two variables. It must be testable. So any statement cannot be a hypothesis. It must have two variables. Then the variables must be measured and the measurement can be tested and the relationship is to be ascertained. Testable statement. Something that researcher can support or falsify with the observable evidence. So falsification is also a part of this one. I'll take it subsequently. Therefore, hypothesis is that sentence which deals with the relationship of two variables which are very clear and which are testable with the light of the data collected. The second definition about hypothesis is an assumption. Guess and assumption they are almost synonyms. Assumption, it is an idea that is proposed for the sake of argument so that it can be tested to see if it might be true. Is it true or not? It is to be tested. So it is testing. The relationship is to be tested. The relationship between two variables are to be tested. That's what's called hypothesis. So then next definition is about, please pass on to the next one. A hypothesis states a presumed relationship. So it is a presumed relationship, assumption, presumed relationship between two variables in a way that can be tested with empirical data. So I am using the word empirical data. It requires at least 1 hour to define what's meant by empirical and empirical data. It will take its days to come. So empirical data, in the light of empirical data, if we are capable of testing the relationship between two variables, then you can call that statement as a hypothesis. My famous research scholar, guide professor, is this scholar, Fred and Kerlinger. He defines what's hypothesis. A conjectural statement. Hypothesis is a conjectural statement, a tentative proposition about the relation between two or more phenomena or variables. So phenomenon is a singular, phenomena or plural. So phenomena or variables and their relationship are to be assumed, or it's a tentative statement. That's what's called Fred and Kerlinger's definition about hypothesis. So the next definition about, please move on to the next slide. A research hypothesis is a statement of expectation. So hypothesis, it creates an expectation, and thereby there is a prediction that will be tested by a researcher. So researcher's expectation is to predict a particular thing. That the statement is called hypothesis. This need not be a fact. This need not be a true. It is less than the truth, less than a fact. That's why it's called hypothesis. Once the hypothesis is tested, and if you finally come to a conclusion, there is a fact or there is a no fact, it is accepted or rejected, then it becomes a thesis. So thesis is the tested hypothesis. Thesis is the rejected hypothesis. A research, next definition is a research hypothesis, also called a scientific hypothesis. It's a statement about the expected outcome of a study. When you venture a study, and in the study, when you expect that some outcome will be there, that outcome is predicted in the hypothesis. That's what's called the definition of hypothesis. Then next definition about hypothesis thesis is it is precise. It's a very precise one. Testable statement that predicts a possible relationship between two or more variables. It may be two variables or more variables. My advice is in the beginning, try to have a hypothesis with two variables. Simple hypothesis always better than. But my dear students, I have come across so many PhD dissertations for purview, review, all these things. There are theses in the name of hypothesis, and it goes pages together, and there is no clear-cut definition about the hypothesis, and it's not possible to fish out the variables, and it's not possible to fish out the relationship. So hypothesis should be very precise. It's a testable statement. It must have a prediction, and the prediction must be on the basis of a possible relationship between two or more variables. This is the definition, or these are the definition of the hypothesis. Therefore, nearly 7 definitions I have given to emphasize the relevance of hypothesis. This hypothesis is very, very relevant and important in a research. So the first point is definition of hypothesis. Let me sum up. Hypothesis, it is a tentative statement. It is the beginning of the researcher's problem. The problem, the problem is crystallized in the form of hypothesis, and the hypothesis is a very concise statement. It must be a clear-cut statement. It must have the relationship between two variables. This is the definition of hypothesis. After some time, I'll stop on any discussion we can have it. I'll proceed to the next topic, types of hypothesis. And if the organizers feel there's a need to have some discussion after this one, I will explain it. Now let me go for the second heading of the lecture. Types of hypothesis. I specifically, categorically use the word hypothesis in the plural sense. My feeling is it's for academic interests. I am enumerating all these things. A researcher may know this one. If it's not possible to know all these things, at least you must know 3 hypothesis names. The first one is a simple hypothesis. Second is a complex hypothesis. Third is a directional hypothesis. Fourth is a non-directional hypothesis. Fifth is an associative and causal hypothesis. Sixth is the null hypothesis. Seventh is alternative hypothesis. So these are the different types of hypotheses. In a technical statistical book, people used to say in an abbreviated form, H0. They use the word H0, H1, or they use the word HA. HO or H0 refers to null hypothesis. HA in statistics, they use the word alternative hypothesis. I think it's not out of place to say, the moment I joined my PhD, first PhD in 1980, I joined the course in statistics. It's a 1-year course consisting of 4 papers, inferential statistics, descriptive statistics, advanced mathematics, and practice. I gone the entire course. All these things facilitated me to understand the statistical significance and its relevance for a researcher. So there, all these things they explained elaborately. Not only this one, in those days, I have gone for a course in a computer program also, 4-on-4. Now, once again, the 4-on-4 is coming to the fore. And so with an expectation that I must be a continuous systematic or scientific research scholar, I've gone for statistics course and I've gone for computer 4-on-4 course. That helped me. But my dear students, please make it a point. I had a confidence in, I have confidence in statistics, somewhat confidence in computer science. But in my first PhD, I never used statistical tool like this or the statistical techniques. In my second PhD in law also, I didn't use it. Therefore, knowing a concept or knowing a particular technique is one thing, applying is another thing. Simply because I know I have to apply, that's not good. That's not good. Relevant technique, relevant statistics must be used. Otherwise, it will not be good. Therefore, please try to learn, and the world is yours. You can apply when you know the technique in the relevant place in the appropriate context. So the next one is, I need a brief discussion about the various types of hypotheses. What do you mean by simple and complex hypothesis? In the subsequent, this slide and subsequent slide, I explained all these things a little bit detail. It's a very simple, it's not that much difficult as it appears to be. So simple hypothesis predicts the relationship between single dependent variable and single independent variable. Now I am introducing a concept called dependent variable and independent variable. Let me have a detailed discussion subsequently. If it's not possible in this lecture session, in the days to come, I'll explain it. So independent variable and dependent variable. So hypothesis is a tentative statement that deals with the relationship between independent variable and dependent variable. If there is one independent variable and one dependent variable, then it is called a simple hypothesis. In a hypothesis, if there are so many variables, so many independent variables and so many dependent variables, or more than one independent, more than one dependent variables, that type of hypothesis is called a complex hypothesis. Simple hypothesis is that which has one independent, one dependent. Complex hypothesis is that which has more than one hypothesis, whether independent, whether independent variable, more independent variable, and more dependent variable. This is the first classification explanation. Then please move on to the next one. Next one is a non-directional hypothesis. The nomenclature itself indicates. It indicates non-directional. It is not giving any directional clue. It simply says two variables are associated, and it does not give any indication, direction. It's what's called non-directional. The other way, directional hypothesis is that gives a direction or a way in which it goes. So the non-directional hypothesis is one when a cause is predicted, cause and effect. The cause and effect relation is there. When cause is predicted, then it's called simply a non-directional hypothesis. But in the specific change in this non-directional hypothesis is not clearly specified. Direction is not specified. Whereas in the case of directional hypothesis, the direction is specified, the cause is specified. So directional hypothesis theses are used to predict whether one variable causes an increase or a decrease in another variable. So increasing, it may be increasing or decreasing. When one variable increases, another variable decreases, we have the correlation called inverse correlation or negative correlation. I'll explain this technique subsequently, not now. So the direction is clear, whether it's going or it's going away, whether it is going up or it's going down. That way it is. So it is what's called a non-directional hypothesis and a directional hypothesis. The next typology is associative hypothesis is that which occurs when there is a change in one variable resulting in a change in the other variable. So one variable is associated. There's a technique called a chi-square technique that we will explain it subsequently. In the chi-square technique, association is dealt with, and it may not point out which is to what extent it is associated. So, whereas the causal hypothesis proposes a cause and effect interaction between two or more variables. So, associative hypothesis and a causal hypothesis are a particular pertinent hypothesis, whereby the associative hypothesis simply it says associated, whereas causal hypothesis simply says this is the cause for that effect. That way it goes. So these are another set of hypothesis types. Then finally the most important hypothesis are the last two hypotheses. Please move on. Next one. Yeah. My dear students, whether you keep in mind the earlier one or not, this is a very important one. Suppose if you are very much bothering about research and that too based on hypothesis research, you must know this one. Testable or experimentable hypothesis. Here I am using the abbreviation HO. It is only for an abbreviation I am using it. It does not mean a null hypothesis. Null hypothesis normally they use HO, not H0. H0 refers to null hypothesis. HA refers to alternate hypothesis. H1 refers to experimental hypothesis. Yeah, testable hypothesis is a falsifiable and measurable prediction. I'm using the word falsifiable. Please underline this word, keep it in mind. I'll explain it subsequently. And it's not at all possible to have 1 or 2 hours with reference to falsification of hypothesis. Anyway, I'll give a scholar name. If you are interested, you go through it. Otherwise, in testing of hypothesis, I will explain this one. So a testable hypothesis is a falsifiable and measurable prediction of how a system will behave or how a dependent variable will react when certain conditions are controlled. In a controlled atmosphere, experimental research, already I explained, experimental research must have 2 groups. One is called experimental group, another is called controlled group. Experimental group is that group where the variable which you want to experiment is allowed, and the control group is that where the variable which you want to experiment is not allowed to have any role to play. So that group is called experimental group and controlled group. In the testable and experimental hypothesis, you can have these experimental hypothesis or testable hypothesis variables. That does not mean that if the variables are not controllable, then even in that context, you can have a hypothesis which can be tested. I'll explain in the days to come. This was called experimental research and ex post facto research. Please just understand the word ex post facto research. Already things happened. Now you want to understand that one. Is it possible to control the variable? There is a method how to study that one. I will explain it subsequently. So it is a hypothesis that can be tested through experimentation to determine if it is supported by evidence or there is no supporting evidence or it is a false. Therefore, dear students, dear researcher, please understand testable and experimental hypothesis, they play a very, very important role in hypothesis testing. The next one is, it's also equally important. If the experimental hypothesis is rejected, then the researcher has an alternate hypothesis. When it is rejected, then you have to accept the other one. It is alternate hypothesis. And every researcher must have experimental hypothesis or alternate hypothesis. In other words, null hypothesis. Null means empty. You can come across null and void. In law, we use the word null and void. Nothing is there. So alternate hypothesis or null hypothesis testing provides a method to reject a null hypothesis within a certain confidence level. If we can reject the null hypothesis, it provides support for the alternate hypothesis. Null hypothesis testing is the basis of the principle of falsification in science. In science, most of the scientists, they used to have hypotheses. They want to falsify. They want to test the falsification of a hypothesis. It's a very important one. I'll try my best to explain it. If it's not possible, we will leave it aside for some time. We'll have a detailed discussion subsequently. So in research, in legal research, testable hypothesis, experimental hypothesis, alternate hypothesis, null hypothesis, these are very, very important one. So now let me pass on to the next part of the discussion. Characteristics of a good hypothesis. I hope after characteristics, the organizers may provide some gap, some time space. If you want to have any discussion, I will explain it. Otherwise, I'll proceed to the part of the discussion. So, characteristics of a good hypothesis. Any statement cannot be a hypothesis. Any statement can be a simple statement, but if you want to say a statement as a hypothesis, it must have these characteristics. So a good hypothesis has some important characteristics so as to make it effective and suitable for investigation. So hypothesis must be first, it must be clear and specific. So there must not be any ambiguity. There must be, the statement must be a clear-cut statement. Sentence must be clear-cut statement. So it must be clear, unambiguous, it must be specific. What I mean by specific, It requires a lot of time to explain specific. When I say a particular word, you have to define the word in that particular context. Suppose if I say a particular age of persons and IQ of persons are related. Age of persons and IQ of persons are related. Sex of persons and weight of persons are associated. I must say, what do you mean by age? Whether age is taken in the context of years completed, or days completed, or weeks completed, or month completed. If it's a human being, normally we take age in terms of years. If it is some other phenomenon, it's not possible to have years. So the word must be clearly defined and it must indicate a particular thing. That's what's called operational definition. I'll take the concept subsequently. Operational definition of concepts. Second one is it must be testable. What do you mean by testable? It is provable. It must be ascertainable. So suppose if I say weight of person, I must say X is 60 kilogram, 60.75 kilogram. Anybody can weight it. Anybody can test it. So testable nature of variables is much more important as far as characteristics of hypothesis. Falsifiable hypothesis. What's meant by falsifiable? In our research, hardly I come across the falsification of hypothesis. What we mean by the word falsifiable is, there is a very popular scholar. I have given the name of the scholar subsequently. You must keep in mind that one. But it requires some more elaborate, detailed discussion to understand the concept. Anyway, it is to be proved. It is to be rejected. So that scholar, he says, all swans are white. There's a popular illustration given by scholars, scientists also. All swans are white. Swan is a bird. So they are white. But when I visited Australia, to my great surprise, I've come across most of the swans in Australia, they are not white. They are black or they are gray in color. So the hypothesis falsification says no swan is white, or all swans are not white. It's to be rejected. So falsifiable. So in science, they have this falsification. I'll give the title of the book of that scholar subsequently, but this falsifiable nature of the hypothesis must be there. Whether you are going to falsify that hypothesis or not, that's a different question. But a hypothesis must have the characteristics of falsifiable nature. When you take a variable, that variable must be falsifiable or reversed or rejected. Otherwise, it's not good, it's not relevant. Then the fourth concept is grounded in theory. What do you mean by grounded in theory? I have explained it very briefly. Most of the researchers, if you analyze deeply, they are either on the basis of theory testing or theory building. So theories are very important. Please don't ask me what's a theory. Again, it requires some more time. I'll explain in the name of theory, ideas, models, everything subsequently. So theory is very important. So hypothesis, if it is based on a theory, that's a good hypothesis. Then next one is rational. What's rational? Rational, we used to say, human beings, we have 6 senses. Anything that is perceived by five senses, it is observation. That is rational. So, sixth sense is the ability to differentiate right and wrong. Therefore, if human beings, if on the basis of the 5 senses, if they observe, they are empirically verifiable, they are rational. And if we analyze everything without bias, without subjectivity, then that is called rational. So hypothesis must be framed based on the rational or rationality. Rationality does not mean any other thing. It means it must be subject to 5 sensory observation, perception, and it may be on the basis of that one it can be. So rational empirical relevance. Empiricism is much more important as far as the legal research is concerned. Some of the research are empirical research. Empirical research are those research which are the data are collected on the basis of perception. Perception means either on the basis of hearing or seeing or smelling or tasting, all these things. If data are collected on the basis of perception, that type of research is called empirical research. So a variable must be on the basis of empirical relevance, then it's called a good hypothesis. So good hypothesis must be clear, must be specific, must be testable, must be falsifiable, must be grounded in theory, must be rational, must have empirical relevance. And finally, it must be concise. In one page, if you draft a hypothesis, you cannot say it's concise. It may create a confusion. In a confusion, you cannot arrive at a conclusion. Therefore, a statement must be a concise statement. And finally, it must have variables. So what we mean by the word variables means two variables, independent variable and dependent variable. So if all these characteristics are fulfilled, then that hypothesis is called a good hypothesis. So if you want to say a particular statement as a hypothesis, it must be fulfilling all these hypotheses. My understanding, in our law university PhD dissertations, people used to say this is the hypothesis, there only concepts are involved. They are not a hypothesis. So concepts relationship is different from variable relationships. So from the concept, one can frame a hypothesis, but that does not mean a hypothesis. So hypothesis, it must be related to variables. Hypothetical propositions, it may be related to concepts. So at the outset, I'd like to emphasize, if you relate two concepts, one can have a hypothetical propositions. Law is a proposition. Contract without consideration is void. It's a proposition. Contract is there, consideration is there. So if this is there, then you can call it as a proposition. If there is a hypothetical less than that one, then it's called a hypothetical proposition. You may come across Moharib Bibi versus Dharmadas Ghosh is a popular case. Minus contract, even though it is supported by a consideration, whether it's a contract, it is subject to be. It lays down that minus contract is always void, even though it is supported by the consideration. So it is a proposition. It is a hypothetical proposition. When there is no free consent, whether the contract is void or voidable, students of contract law, you may come across when there is no free consent, it is voidable. When the contract is vitiated by unlawful consideration, unlawful objects, then it's a void. So it is a hypothetical proposition. Can it be converted into a hypothesis? It is possible to convert into a hypothesis, because the converting into hypothesis, you have to define the concepts or convert the concepts into variables. It requires some more time to explain it. So concepts, if there are only concepts, then it's hypothetical proposition. If the concepts, if they are by operational definition converted into a variable, then one can have a hypothesis, provided if there's an independent variable and dependent variable, provided if it is concise, provided if it is in empirical relevance, provided if it is rational, provided if it is theoretical basis, provided if it is falsifiable, provided it is testable, provided if the words are clearly operationally defined. So that is the subtle difference between the hypothetical proposition and hypothesis. So my task is, having been having in the office of the Vice Chancellor for a long time, I'm sorry, for 3 years time, I come across so many PhDs. The confusion is there. I hope from this time onwards, there shall not be any confusion about research in law with reference to whether we need a hypothesis or we don't need a hypothesis. If you want to have a hypothesis, these characteristics must be there. If you don't have a hypothesis, you can very well have a hypothetical proposition, both research. Whether it is good or not, I don't come to the subjective conclusion in this context. So with this, let me pass on to the next slide. Can I? Yeah, yeah. My dear students, whether it is possible to understand all these concepts or not, at least keep in mind these two important characteristics of a good hypothesis. Testable. If a hypothesis is testable, is subject to be tested, it is possible to be tested, then it fulfills some of the characteristics of a hypothesis. A hypothesis to be testable using appropriate research methods and techniques. Therefore, in research, there are techniques. There are data collection technique and data analyzing techniques. By using these data collection and analyzing techniques, if we can able to test the hypothesis, it fulfills the definition of testable nature. So testing requires empirical evidence. Empirical evidence, what do you mean by empirical evidence? Evidence, we need the empirical data. Empirical data refers to data which are collected on the basis of perception or sensory observation. So to measure and quantify in order to support or refute the hypothesis, that's a very important one as far as the testable nature of the hypothesis is concerned. So next one is falsifiable nature. So what do you mean by falsifiable nature? When we say experimental hypothesis, we have an alternate hypothesis. When we have a testable hypothesis, we used to have a null hypothesis. So null hypothesis is that a hypothesis that cannot be proven false typically falls outside the scientific inquiry. Suppose if I am saying my karma, it enabled me to enter into the law course, I am not happy. Can you test it? Can you scientifically verify my karma? It's not possible. So certain things they are called. That's why this type of research is called metaphysical research. It's not physical phenomenon. Physical phenomenon is subject to be scientific research. When you say it's a metaphysical phenomenon, it is not subject to scientific research. So falsifiable nature is possible only with reference to physical phenomenon. Physical phenomenon refers to including human beings behavior, attitude, all these things. I think it's not out of place to say once the medical field, in the medical field, there's a great revolution. They have introduced what's called MRI, MRI, fMRI. So this mind resonance mind, yeah, MRI, fMRI. So with that, when you feel a particular thing, it fires in the mind, in the brain, a particular part. So MRI is a very powerful tool in testing so many things. In this context only, the neuroscience also helps in criminal law in other areas of jurisprudence as far as law is concerned. So falsifiable nature is a very important characteristics of scientific research. This criterion ensures that research remains objective and open to revision based on evidence. My dear students, please keep in mind, you have done a research. You have come to a particular conclusion. This conclusion is subject to be verified by different persons the days to come. The subsequent researcher may come and he may say, I don't agree with this scholar. I want to reject this. I want to go a different one. That way he can go. So in this context, this falsifiable nature is very, very important. So I don't know how much you understand this one, but simply keep in mind, testability and falsifiability, these two are important characteristics of a good hypothesis. So hypothesis fulfills these characteristics. Please move on to the next one. Yeah. I request my students, I understand, I am given to understand that there are very good students in masters who are very much interested in reading widely. If you are interested, you please read these two important books. One is Karl Popper. Karl Popper is a very popular research methodologist. So he has written this book called Scientific Theory should make predictions that can be tested, and theory should be rejected if these predictions are shown not to be correct. He has pointed out this one, scientific theory, characteristics of scientific theory. He has also popularized this one. Empirical research is one that is based on observation and measurement of phenomena as directly experienced by the researcher. This scholar, Karl Popper, next slide, please. Yeah, these are the books of Karl Popper and Rene Descartes. Karl Popper's book, The Logic of Scientific Discovery. I think it is available in the Google. You can go and read it. Similarly, this article, Conjectures and Refutations. Refutation refers to falsification of hypotheses. So Karl Popper suggested that knowledge progresses by a method of conjecture and refutation. So human knowledge, it grows because of these methods. So his book is a popular book, very popular book, and in research methodology, it's a little bit difficult to understand, but my students are capable of understanding this one. You can go through that. A hypothesis proposed and subjected to scrutiny by attempts to show that it is false. If it survives such a test, it is provisionally accepted, although the truth can never be known. See, after writing all these things, he says, it is a thesis. Anybody can come and reject this one, and once again, it is subject to verify. So Karl Popper is one of the pioneer scholar in research methodology. If you are interested, you can read it. It's only for your purpose I have given this one. Whether you know it, Karl Popper or not, at least the second scholar, Rene Descartes. It's not Descartes, it is Rene Descartes. It's a very, very popular in philosophy. His book is Discourse and the Method. Discourse and the Method. He suggested Cartesian dualism. Cartesian dualism, if you go to the Google, there are so many articles, so many points, so many write-ups on this one. So Cartesian dualism. Dualism means two things. So Cartesian dualism predominantly refers to Rene Descartes. He argues that there are two kinds of substances, mental and physical subjects. Dualism is a very important philosophical concept. It refers to the entire world. It is made up of only two things. One is physical. If it is not physical, then it is mental. These two ways. So in Dvaita, we may come across in philosophy, Dvaita, non-dualism. Advaita, Advaita means Advaita. So Visishta Advaita, all these things are there. Here, my point is dualism. One is physical, another is mental. There are persons who used to argue there is nothing like dualism, it's a monism. I don't enter into controversy, but Descartes says one is physical, another is mental. So the mind and body mutually influence each other's actions, and thereby it recognizes physical activities, physical action. So Cartesian dualism or Descartes' dualism is very important, very relevant philosophy or a concept which every researcher, at least you must know that one. Then only you can have a detailed discussion about any philosophical concepts in research. So whether you understand this one or not, it's my feeling, it's my duty to expose these two scholars in the research methodology field. If you couldn't follow, ignore it. You proceed to the remaining one. Next one, please. So variables in hypothesis. Up to this one, I have taken what's meant by hypothesis. Now we are going on to the next one, variables in hypothesis. If you need any clarification up to this one, Please, organizers, make it ascertain. If you want any questions to be clarified up to this one, I will clarify it. Otherwise, I will proceed to the next one.
Sir, actually, students were listening very cleanly.
Okay,
So
okay,
the question session can be posted at
okay,
the end of
okay,
the session.
okay, good, good. I'm happy. So, variables in hypothesis. Here in the slide, I'm using the word HO. HO, this is an abbreviation acronym, refers to hypothesis. Hypothesis takes the form of a cause and effect. Let me tell you simply, hypothesis, this word may sound very big, but it's very simple. Cause and effect. That statement is called hypothesis. If X occurs, then Y will occur. If you work hard, you will get good marks. Working hard, getting marks. This is a hypothesis. More number of hours read, more number of marks secured. This is a hypothesis. Therefore, if X occurs, then Y occurs. Y will occur. This is a hypothesis. Therefore, hypothesis is a type of cause-effect statement. It's what's called hypothesis. The cause is called the independent variable. Here I'm using the acronym IV. Normally in our statistics and research methodology, they use the word IV. IV refers to independent variable. So the independent variable and its effect is found in the dependent variable. So a dependent variable is referred to as a DV. So the relationship between the independent variable and dependent variable, that statement is what's called hypothesis. So in a hypothesis, there ought to be one or more independent variables, and there ought to be one or more dependent variables. That type of statement, that type of relationship is called hypothesis. My dear students, the difference is it should not be confined only to a concept. It must be a variable. What is a variable? Variable is anything that varies from person to person, place to place, time to time. If it varies, it's a variable. If the cause varies, the dependent variable is also varying. That is the simplest definition as far as variables concerned. There are two types of variables. One is called a qualitative variable. Another one is called a quantitative variable. Let me tell you, sex of persons, whether it's a qualitative variable or a quantitative variable, sex of persons is a qualitative variable. Boy, girl. So two variables. Intelligence, whether it is a qualitative variable or a quantitative variable, intelligence is a qualitative variable. Behavior, qualitative variable or quantitative variable, it's a behavior is a qualitative variable. Attitude is a qualitative or quantitative. Attitude is a qualitative variable. So there are variables, several variables. And our field is social science field. Law is very well a social science field. Most of the variables are qualitative variables. And the quantitative variables are those variables which can be measured. For instance, height of a person, whether it is quantitative or qualitative, it is a quantitative variable. You can measure accurately, we can measure the height of a person. And you can measure the weight of the person. You can measure it. So similarly, so quantitative variables are those variables which can be measured. Marks secured by persons, it is a quantitative variable. You can accurately in decimal, you can measure it. So qualitative variables are those variables which are only describable. Describable. You may come across, there is a popular statement, I don't know whether can I give it or not. Anyway, as a teacher, I can give it. So, கருப்பு தான் எனக்கு பிடிச்ச கலர். ஒரு popular cinema song. In those days, people don't like this black color. Nowadays, the trend is changing. Black is beauty, they are saying. Black is powerful, they are saying. So, what is beauty? What is not beauty? what is good, what is not good. It's only describable. It's not measurable. So the variables which are only describable are called qualitative variables. Quantitative variables are those which can be measured exactly, accurately, is called quantitative variables. So I have pointed out independent variable and dependent variable, and I have pointed out these variables can be measured. Some of the variables can be described. Please pass on to the next one. Yeah. In research, variables are any characteristics that, that can take on different values, such as height, age, temperature, or test scores. These are quantitative variables. Researchers often manipulate or measure independent dependent variables in studies to test cause and effect relationship. See, here, my dear students, please take it from me. Even the qualitative variables can be described. Attitudinal study, you can take a qualitative variable and you can quantify it. It's possible to quantify it. So our endeavor is to frame questionnaire in such a manner, give a scaling technique and measure it. So the researcher's purpose is, the researcher aim is, if you want to quantify the qualitative variable, you can very well quantify it. So experimental variables are used in experiments and manipulate independent variables directly to see how they influence the dependent variable. That way, the independent and dependent variables are defined. Therefore, I think I can tell in a nutshell, any variable can be measured. Don't come to the conclusion whether can I measure the beauty? Yes. What for the beauty contest is there? Judges, they are sitting, they are giving marks, and they are awarding it. The highest person, highest mark securer is called the beauty. So anything is measured. But the thing is, these are the scales you have to. Attitude can be measured or not. Attitudinal scale is there and it can be measured. So behavior, can it be as measured? It is possible to be measured. So, and the working ability, efficiency, can it be measured? It is possible to be measured. So any variable, whether it's independent variable or dependent variable, they can be measured. And for that purpose, you have to design a particular manner about the technique and other yardsticks. Please move on to the next slide. So measurability of variables. What we mean by this measurability? Assess, evaluate, or gauge the variable and its position. Measurability refers to the capability to quantify the variables in question, which allows for clear analysis and interpretation. For the purpose of interpretation of the data, analysis of the data, the variables are to be quantified. You must say clearly, this is, suppose if you say, suppose when I say a particular thing, this is good, this is not good. This is good, this is bad, fair, very good. What is the yardstick? Suppose on the other side, if you say, this is 50.1 percentage in the grade, in the cadre, it is 49.9. Can you able to differentiate this one? 49.9 and 50.1, even though the margin is very small, you can say of these two, which is better. 50.1 is better than 49.9. So that way the measurability helps researcher to put the findings the exact accurate position. The process of turning abstract concepts into measurable variables and indicators is called operationalization. It's a very big concept. Now I'll try my best to explain here. Uh, if it's not possible, underline the concept. We can have a discussion in the days to come. Operationalization. Let me take a particular variable. Suppose if you take efficiency of judicial officers in disposing cases. If you say efficiency of judicial officers in disposing the cases, what do you mean by efficiency of the judicial officers in disposing the cases? If you say number of cases disposed by a judge in a month, that indicates the level of efficiency. Low level, moderate level, high level. You can have a classification. That way the efficiency, low, moderate, optimum, and high. High efficiency, low efficiency, moderate efficiency, or optimum efficiency. That way that efficiency can be explained or defined. Similarly, attitude, when you say attitude is a qualitative variable. If you say attitude by the word, a particular person's knowledge, involvement, and assessment, all these put together, I mean by the word attitude. So in this category, a particular person secures less than this category, it is low. From this one, it is optimum. From this one, it is maximum. That way, if you define it operationally, then it's what's called operational definition, operationalization. So in measurement also, this operationalization is very important. Here is a place where a concept can be converted into a variable. Once a concept is converted into a variable for the purpose of measurement, then that set of variables can be brought under the ambit of hypothesis. That's very important with reference to this one. So operationalization is very important with reference to measurability. So students, you might have come across points, 3-point scale, 5-point scale, 7-point scale with reference to measurement. So it is the capability of being measured, the ability to describe the specific terms as of size, amount, duration, or mass, usually refers as a quantity. Science is the study of facts, things that are measurable, testable, repeatable, verifiable. These are the characteristics of scientific research. If you say my research is a scientific research, it must be, the variables must be measurable. The variables must be testable. The variables must be, hypothesis must be repeatedly testable. Verifiability is there. Anybody can test it. If it is there, you can call it that way. So measurability, this operationalization is very important. The next point is there are 4 scales of measurement. I doubt it to what extent my students may follow it. Anyway, it's my duty to explain it. Let me explain it. Nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale, and ratio scale. These are the 4 scales of measurability. The least amount of information can be obtained in nominal scale. Whereas in the scale of in ordinal, interval, and ratio, better quantum is there. The best scale of measurement is ratio scale. So ratio scale is that scale which can be better reliable. Let me briefly explain these 4 scales for a brief understanding of my students. So nominal scale. Suppose in research, the researcher is doing a particular project in which you are trying to point out. Let me take a tentative hypothesis. Advocates in the High Court, their income, this is the broader area. There is an association between income of the advocates and the gender of advocates. We have a presumption that advocates, male advocates, they have a higher income than female advocates. If you want to say male advocate, female advocate, this gender, I'm not using the word sex, the gender is a variable. This is a nominal variable. I am giving female 1, male 2. Does it mean any quantification? It's only a nominal scale. Suppose the the status of advocates, social status of advocates, and their income income are associated. Social status I classify into social status, upper social status, middle social status, lower social status. Suppose if we categorize like this, either on the basis of income, or family income, or property income, or something like that, then it is just a nominal scale. So this 1, 2, 3, it will not seriously communicate any quantification. It's only a nominal scale. Interval scale. Suppose if I am saying the age of advocates and the income of advocates, they are associated. Or let me operationally define number of years practiced in the High Court and the quantum of income earned out of practice from the High Court, they are associated. Here there are two variables. Number of years. Number of years, it may start with 1 year to sometimes 50 years. So 1 to 50, I'm sorry, 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to, that way it goes. It is what's called interval scale. And income. In the Supreme Court, I come across, there are advocates who are minting money in the advocate profession. Per month, they are earning even crores of rupees. So, suppose if you want to measure that one, we can say less than 10,000 rupees per month. 11,000 to 10,001 to 20,000, and it goes up to crores, or we can say more than 1 lakh per month, or more than 5 lakhs per month. That is what's called interval scale. Then ratio scale. The best scale in measurement is ratio scale. Ratio scale is, suppose I say an advocate who practices 50 years, an advocate who practices 5 years. So 5 years if you say 1, and 50 years if you say 10 times of 5 years, 50. It is what's called a ratio. So if you say 1 as 5 years, within 5 years, 2 as within 10 years, 3 as within 15 years, 4 as 20, that way it goes, it's a ratio. So this ratio scale is the best measurement scale as far as quantification is concerned. If you understand this one or not, you keep it in mind when we come across a statistical analysis, statistical tool to measure it, we'll have a detailed discussion. Therefore, my dear students, please make it a point that there are scales which can be measured, that can be used even to quantify the qualitative data. So without quantifying the qualitative data, it's very difficult to do any particular research in law, and more particularly in the non-doctrinal research and pure and applied research, it's a little bit difficult. Therefore, with this point, let me wind up this discussion, and I am free to explain your doubts in this context. Thank you very much for the good opportunity. Yes, please, organizers, you can proceed.
Sir, it's been a very informative session, sir. Now, time for interactive session. Participants kindly raise questions if any.
Yeah.
So, good morning, sir. This is Jayadurga from first year LL Human Rights Branch. So, my question on hypothesis is: can a researcher, after making a thorough study based on his initial term of observation, making a hypothesis either in a supportive or a falsifying manner, can he subsequently change his hypothesis in a way that contradicts his own opinion upon the initial stage? In other words, can a researcher contradict his own hypothesis in a conclusive stage? Sir, this is my question.
My dear student, why do you want to contradict? If you say the hypothesis accepted, say it's accepted. If you say hypothesis rejected, say it's rejected. That is what's called objectivity. A researcher has no particular idea to say this one. I want to say this one. I want to find this one. A researcher's duty is not to find anything new. If there is a fact, you are going to say this is. If there is a different thing, you are going to say this one. Therefore, every research starts with a hypothesis, and parallelly there is an opposite thing called null hypothesis. Testable hypothesis, alternate hypothesis, the opposite of it. So if you reject the experimental hypothesis, the alternate opposite hypothesis will be accepted. If a testable hypothesis is not accepted, null hypothesis is accepted. Therefore, without saying, you need not revise it. Based on the data collected, it is found that the experimental hypothesis is rejected. Therefore, automatically, the alternate hypothesis to be accepted. So the null hypothesis is accepted. I think I made my point. Therefore, researcher purpose is not to prove the hypothesis. Researcher purpose is to test the hypothesis. I applied my mind. Whatever comes, I am going to say. This is okay. So we have to correct ourselves whether you want to modify the hypothesis. There is no need because it is inbuilt. Already it is there. When you start a hypothesis, parallelly there is opposite thing called alternate hypothesis. There is a null hypothesis. If the experimental hypothesis is rejected, automatically you have to go the alternate hypothesis. Suppose if you let me take this one. There is no association between as a gender of students and the pursuit of legal knowledge in the law course. I have a presumption. In those days, people used to say, don't go for law. People used to say, law padicha ponnu kuduka maatan. That was the belief. But most of the law colleges today is girl dominant. So whether this the attitude of persons, whether it is related to law course or not, you can take this hypothesis: gender and attitude towards law, male, female. If you have a hypothesis, male have a fashion towards law and female they are not, you are going to say no. There is no association. So that way, the research itself, there is an inbuilt. There is an experimental hypothesis, opposite is there. There is no association and there is no association. There is a correlation, there is no correlation. There is inverse correlation, no inverse correlation. That way it is to be.
Sir, thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My name is Vishali and I'm from Maritime Department.
Good.
Regarding the characteristics of hypothesis, a good hypothesis in which you have said that in case of metaphysical hypothesis, it cannot be falsified because it cannot be proved by scientific scientific experiments and regard that. So how to find if a metaphysic research is a good hypothesis if it cannot be falsifiable? So what parameters can be used for that kind of research?
Oh,
That is my
you want
question.
to have a metaphysical research in law?
Yes, sir. I have a concern about that metaphysical research.
Can you give a concept metaphysical research in law? Concept?
Sir, for example, take the example of parallel universe, sir. So in this case, it is it cannot be mentioned. It cannot be found in scientific experiment.
What do you mean?
So in that,
Yeah. Let us have a discussion. What do you mean by parallel universe? What is a
sir,
parallel universe?
sir, I think parallel universe is something. It is not correctly defined or it is not approved, sir. But I have a belief there might be a parallel universe.
So
Like for example,
let
yes.
me take I don't believe what you believe. Let me take. I take a hypothesis. There is a parallel universe.
Yes.
I mean by the word universe, Jupiter is a landmass. It's a celestial body. If I define parallel universe as a celestial body, as a planet, there are 8 planets in and around the solar system. You have to define what you mean by parallel universe. The thing is, my understanding is, parallel universe, you mean to say there is similar to Earth, there is a planet in which human beings are living.
Yes, sir.
You take a null hypothesis. No parallel universe. In the sense, no other human being like. No other human being like. What do you mean by human being like? Persons with this stature, 6 senses, and having these characteristics. You have to very carefully define. Suppose if a person comes from alien, if he's having 7 senses, 8 senses, 9 senses, human beings, we are good only in mediocre. Do you have the smell like a honeybee? Do you have an eyesight like an eagle? Do you have a smell like an ant? You don't have. If there is a person who is having 7, 8, 9 senses, whether he is a human being or not, so you have to clearly define. By the word universe means a planet which is capable of having human beings. Then human beings means a person having 6 senses like these categories. If you say all these things, one way or other, this is not there, 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 this is not. Therefore, no parallel universe. Let me tell you, there is a very popular researcher, Yuval Noah Harari. He has written a beautiful book, latest book by name Nexus. In this book, he pointed out artificial AI, alien intelligence will come. He says alien intelligence, not any human being, not any living being. He says artificial intelligence as alien intelligence. So in research, you have to define the concept clear cut. If anybody asks what do you mean by parallel world, you must be in a position to define it. You can do a research, but it cannot be a scientific research if you take that concept like that. Parallel universe. That is what's called metaphysical. Physical beyond physical. Beyond physical, if there is anything like karma, transmigration of soul, God, or all these entities, then that is what's called metaphysical. It is the area of philosophy. In the area of philosophy, law is not coming. Law is a normative science. Law describes only prescription. Law describes only prescriptions. If you want to do any other type, then this department is not an appropriate department. You can do research. In India, we have a lot of hundreds and thousands of research work in the name of metaphysics. You can do it,
Yes,
right?
sir.
I
Thank you,
think
sir.
I have answered your question.
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Myself, R. Sujit Chanda from Constitution Law, Human Rights Department, first year.
Yeah,
I have a doubt. You have explained about the types of hypothesis.
yeah.
In that simple and complex hypothesis, you have stated dependent variable and independent variable. What is exact meaning, sir? Dependent and independent variable.
Independent variable is the cause. Dependent variable is the effect. In Chennai, my understanding in Chennai, whether the temperature is low or not today,
It's
when
low, sir.
low. So when season changes, temperature changes. This is the rainy season. When season changes, temperature changes. Season is an independent variable. Temperature is a dependent variable. When one changes, the other changes. Okay? You're a constitutional law student. Let me give you another illustration.
Yes. Sir,
Yeah.
I have another doubt also,
Yeah.
sir. You have also definition of hypothesis is predictions of assumptions. Maybe how is predictions is prediction means it's an unproven thing. How it involved in the research system?
Yeah. So let me tell you one thing. Let me take in a constitutional law, Supreme Court judges, Supreme Court let me take number of years as a judge, number of years as a judge in the High Court, and the rate of disposal of cases by the Supreme Court, High Court judge, number of years as a judge at the High Court, and the rate of disposal of the cases by the judge in the High Court. They are related. Number of years as a judge in the High Court is an independent variable. It influences the rate of disposal of the cases. If he's an experienced judge, one day he is going on disposing so many cases. So number of judgments delivered is more if he gains more experience. Is it right or not?
Yes.
When you come across a judge in the High Court, 10 years experience, can you able to predict he will dispose more cases than newly appointed judges or not? Can you predict it or not?
Yes. Maybe.
No,
I
maybe.
not.
The hypothesis says it is. If it is not, you have to say no. What you are going to lose? Researcher is not at all losing or gaining anything. It's only knowledge. There is no relation between years of experience and the quantum of cases disposed. You come to the conclusion. It's a wonderful study. In research, most of the findings will be wonderful findings if we reject the existing order. For a long time, I have a hypothesis. I did when I was a VC, I did it briefly. That time, the Supreme Court of women judges, I had a feeling. Women judges of the Supreme Court, the number of cases, it was low. Disposal of cases, it was low. Once a judge from Madras elevated to the High Court, a woman judge, she disposed a lot of cases. So average case disposed by a woman judge is higher than average cases disposed by a man judge of that particular period. Reject it. There is no association between gender and the rate of disposal of the cases. What's wrong? If it is right, you are saying. If it is wrong, it is not your point, it's fact. Therefore, res ipsa loquitur, you know the meaning? Res ipsa loquitur. Let the thing speak itself. You are not speaking, researcher is not speaking. The data they are speaking. You are facilitating the data to speak. Hypothesis is that through the hypothesis, researcher is not speaking, the data they are speaking. Therefore, you need not prove any hypothesis. You have to collect data, test the variables, quantify the variables, test the hypothesis. What is the result? You simply say this is the result. So there is nothing harm in it, right?
Thank you for your explanation, sir.
Good.
Sir, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Myself, Priya from Criminal Law Department, sir, second year LLM.
Yeah.
So my question is, I came to know that for a research paper, there should be minimum 5 hypotheses, sir. And you have explained the type of... Am I wrong, sir?
Okay. See, if the university prescribes such norms, it's not my part to explain it. But my feeling is, if you want to have 5 hypotheses, I will give you 10 hypotheses. Have a major hypothesis and have sub-hypotheses. Divide the hypothesis into several categories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can go up to 10 hypotheses. But even one hypothesis is good. Even for a PhD, my feeling is 2 hypotheses, 3 hypotheses are good, and you can have any number of sub-hypotheses. My understanding, there is no. But professors and others, they may prescribe that this number of hypotheses are required. All these things are not necessary. If the research is a wonderful research, one hypothesis will be good. Let me tell you, gravitational pull, law of gravity, only one thing, the earth has a gravity. Whatever objects it is in the air, it will come down. One hypothesis or several hypotheses? Only one. It becomes a law. Theory, then after theory, it becomes a law. Therefore, in research, one hypothesis is enough. Couple of few sub-hypotheses are enough. And that too in the master's degree, 2 hypotheses, it's our convenience. If you want to have more hypotheses, you can frame sub-hypothesis.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir, and you said...
Yeah.
You said if you are going with an experimental hypothesis and it can be rejected, and we have to go to the next hypothesis like that, sir.
Yeah.
So if one hypothesis is rejected, it is necessary to mention in the research paper itself, sir.
Yeah. No, not. See, it is an inbuilt mechanism. Let me tell you, you are a criminal law student. There is a belief in Tamil Nadu stating that it's a belief. I converted this belief into hypothesis. Advocates and practice in the courts. Advocates practice in the courts. There is an association between the social background of advocates and the civil and criminal side practice of the high courts, practice of the advocates. We have a feeling that it is an observation that in the society, advocates who are first generation or second generation, they used to go for criminal side. And advocates who have a third, fourth, fifth generation, they used to go for civil side. And in advocates, those who are having a good background, they used to go for high court. Advocates who are young, without any background, social or economic background, they go for lower court. Even in the lower court, they are going for criminal side. In the criminal side, every day you can get money. In civil cases, even 1 year, one case may not come. So this is the belief. This is an observation. You need not say it's a belief. It's an observation. Can you test it or not? Can you convert into a hypothesis or not? This is the way.
Yes.
There is an association between advocates' practice in courts, in the civil or criminal, are associated. Higher category of advocates, they practice in the civil side. Lower background of advocates practice in the criminal side. Higher background advocates practice in the high court. Lower background advocates practice in the lower court. Let me tell you another thing. women concerned, women advocates and men advocates, women advocate used to have more practice in civil side. Men advocate used to have more practice in the criminal side. This is an observation. Can you have a test in the hypothesis in the High Court, Supreme Court, and the High Court and the subordinate court, civil side and criminal side, whether there is an association between gender and practice at the practice side? Can you have a hypothesis or not?
Yes, sir.
You very well, you can have it.
Hmm.
This way, so you can have it.
Okay, sir.
Okay, good.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, I have got doubts with respect to review of literature.
Yeah.
Is there a prescribed hierarchy or example, if I'm including judgments, articles, and books, is there a priority, sir? Prescribed hierarchy?
I appreciate that you have gone through the lecture serial lecture in
Your
depth.
previous
Let me tell
session,
you.
sir, I was not able to present
Yeah.
the question then.
Yeah. The thing is, you want to find out a gap in the research. First, you go through the latest article. If you go through the latest article on your area, the researchers say, I've gone through these literatures. They are not doing this one, so I am doing it. Go back. Go through those references. In the article, references are given. Select the references. Latest reference. In the latest reference, go that side. So you can be able to find out. It is what is called deductive logic. I'm interested. Go this way. Let me tell you, when you give a write-up, what I mean by this hierarchy in the review of literature, suppose you come under what branch of law?
Environmental law, sir.
Environmental law. In environmental law, it's a recent subject. In the international environmental law, there are lots and lots of works on environmental law. And that too in the scientific field, in the climatology field. So you take international or environmental law books, climatology books first. Then you come down to India. When I take India, there are books, but it's not related to that one. Then you come down. As far as the systematic research concerned, it's a very, very limited book. And as far as law concerned, particularly in your point of view concerned, there is no book, no article. So I have taken. So we have, from a world perspective, national perspective, state perspective, and region perspective, latest perspective. You can come across, I have come across the same article, but it was 20 years earlier. Now I want to do right now. That way, this is what's called reverse pyramidal model or reverse triangle model. It is for analysis, but finding the gap, you can either go from the latest article, but going through the latest article, you must have some knowledge. Suppose polluter pay principle, precautionary principle. If you don't know what's meant by polluter pay principle, precautionary principle, sustainable development, can you pursue any research in environmental law?
No, sir, not at all.
How do you understand all these things? Without Environmental Protection Act, can you understand anything? Without understanding the hydrosphere, lithosphere, or hydrosphere, lithosphere, or atmosphere, can you understand environmental law? Without understanding carbon emission, what is the quantum of carbon emission? Can you understand environmental law? Without understanding greenhouse gases, can you understand environmental law? So for all these things, you need a broader spectrum of understanding of the subject, the current law, everything. You may come across the Environmental Protection Act, Water Act, Air Act. So all these things. I used to say, in India, we have all these acts, whether there is pollution or not. Whether there is pollution or not, Yesterday
Yes,
you come
sir.
across because of the rain, now all the rivers are going with the floods, and all the rivers are going with the floods. Along with the floods, pollutant, this foam is also going. They are going to spoil the crops. It's a pollution. So laws are there, whether enforcement, what extent? This is a way of finding out the problem. I think I answered your question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, my
Thank you.
second question is,
Yeah.
could review of literature be based on statutory materials alone, sir? For example, if I'm comparing the current legislation with another erstwhile legislation, for example, BNS 2023 with IPC 1860, could the research article rely only on statutory materials, sir?
So a
That is the code alone.
research article can rely on statutory materials. It's a primary material. But is there any gap in that statute? Are you going to fill any gap in the statute? Is it a gap? Gap is
There might be, sir,
Gap is
to fill the ambiguity or.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. There might be lots of
No.
lacunas or ambiguities.
You can say it is a critical research. There is a statute.
Okay.
The statute is not answering this question. It's a critical research. If you want to find out, you can take, you are a good student, you can take it. I have come across all the existing environmental statutes, acts, everything, but they are not fulfilling the purpose for which they are enacted because of the gap. Simply say, see, polluter pay principle, all these principles, what it say, Environment Protection Act, what say,
To abate environmental degradation.
Yeah.
To abate pollution.
Yeah. Can any person approach the court, normal judiciary, file in FIR or anything? No, the state is a party. If you make like any other crime, any person can be a complainant, then it's good. If you go that way, it's a critical research. So statute gaps can be found out, but it's a critical research. That gap you can say for suggestions. But if you want to go a systematic research, the gap is to be filled. It is. I am of the opinion, I may be wrong, but it's only an observation, hypothetical point I'm saying. United States of America and all the developed countries, have they polluted the entire world or not?
Yes, sir. Certainly,
polluting the entire world, they are advocating don't pollute. How can I come up? Without polluting, without doing any damage, can a country prosper? I can say, hypothetically, the superpower countries once again, in the name of pollution, in the name of polluter pay principle, all these things, they are trying to belittle the developing countries or controlling the developing countries. Can I say hypothetically?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, pollution is international. That's why people are arguing, you introduce universal basic income concept. You polluted the entire world. You looted the entire world. All the people are 8 billion population is there. Distribute all the income of the world to all the people equitably. If not equitably, at least guarantee minimum income, give it. So universal basic income concept is there. Will the developed countries provide that one?
It's still questionable, sir, unanswered.
Yeah, unanswered question. So when they looted this country, now they are advocating not to loot.
Yes.
See, I am not advocating this one, but there are so many sides. So many sides. Okay, good.
Yes, sir. So final question.
Yeah.
Pardon me for feeding off your precious time.
No. I am happy to answer your questions.
So there are many citation patterns, sir. We are prescribed to use Blue Book 21st edition.
Yeah.
But the beauty of the Indian Constitution, those words are being amputed. It is like shortened, India cons, and we mentioned the article. Is there any form of citation, the pattern that you would suggest, sir?
Yeah.
Indian citation forms.
My citation is not necessary. My citation is not required. I will give the citation. You follow any citation, any book, and you state in the methodology, in this dissertation, in this thesis, I follow this method of citation. If you quote it, you can follow that one. So the first one, in my first PhD thesis, I followed Thorabian manual. There is a book called Thorabian manual. It is there.
Yes.
And in our university, we used to follow MLA style sheet, MLA method, Modern Language Association. And another methodology book is American Psychology Association, APA. It is there. So Thorabian manual, MLA, APA, these are there. But recently, the Delhi Law University, Professor Ranbir Singh, he published a book, and it's an updated one. He points out how to quote citations from websites or articles available in the internet. All you can follow. As a researcher, in the methodology, you can simply say, in my dissertation, for the purpose of this dissertation, I follow this method. Your purpose is served. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any method you can follow.
Thank you so much for your invaluable time,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I'm Vignesh from first year LLM.
Yeah.
Sir, I just have a doubt on the characteristics of a good hypothesis that you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Most of these characteristics are applicable in terms of hypothesis,
Hmm.
but they seem a bit incompatible. Some of them, at least, seem a bit incompatible in case of hypothetical propositions.
Yeah.
So, is there a good characteristic of hypothetical proposition that you'd elaborate on, sir?
Okay. You ventured into a very, very deep concept. Are you bothering about hypothesis, or are you bothering about hypothetical propositions? I confine today's discussion only to hypothesis. If you want, let me explain it subsequently, hypothetical propositions. In what way the hypothesis and hypothetical propositions are relevant to pure research, applied research, doctrinal research, non-doctrinal research. We can take and we can explain it. So there is no need to convert a concept into a variable in hypothetical proposition. If you simply say, this is my hypothetical proposition, these are the two concepts. So mens rea is required to recognize an offense. Mens rea, offense. Okay. So
Yes,
two
sir.
concepts are there. What branch you belong to?
I belong to the Constitutional Law Department.
Constitutional law. So, all right, let me take constitutional morality. Constitutional morality is a very basic concept in constitutional law. Suppose if you interested in constitutional morality, there is a changing trend in interpreting the concept constitutional morality through the years. 1950, what is the meaning of constitutional morality? 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, 2010, 2020. So the definition of constitutional morality changes according to social morality. There is a concept, social morality. It varies. Every year it varies. Now it is. In the 1950s, can you imagine living together concept in marriage?
No, sir. Certainly
Now,
not.
is it legal or not?
It is. It is.
Yeah. So social morality, it has taken a lot of changes. So when social morality changes, are there any corresponding changes in the constitutional morality? Can you take it or not?
Yes, sir.
You need not measure it. It's not possible to measure it. This is a concept and this is a concept. Hypothetical proposition. If you take hypothetical proposition, there is no need to, what is record is, you have to define what is social morality. With reference to social morality, I take only marriage. With reference to constitutional morality, I used to refer only justice. How constitutional morality is based on justice. That too not complete justice, that too on the basis of social justice. You operationally define the concept. Justice only with reference to social justice. You operationally define the concept social morality only with reference to marriage, whether it is to be registered or not. In your Hindu Marriage Act, whether live-in relationship is prohibited anywhere earlier.
No, sir.
Registration is the thing. So it is not. No, when both parties live together peacefully, what is the problem? Even
There's
today,
none, sir.
registration, whether it is mandatory?
No, sir.
No, then what? There are millions and millions of people in India who are living without any registering the marriage. There is no bond beyond the mind bond. There is no bond beyond the love bond. Contracts, bond by contracts, they can be simply broken. The affection contract is strong, solid, integrating together. That way, it is the researcher's aim, conception, and how he defines a particular concept, how he explains and how he measures the concept or analyzes the concept. That's important.
Sure, sir.
Good.
Thank you, sir.
Good. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
This is Senthil Kumar from Labor Law.
Good.
My question is, what is the difference between independent variable and experimental variable, sir? Whether all independent variable or experimental variable? Yeah.
See, in experimental research, independent variable, dependent variable. When you say experimental research, independent and dependent variables are there. One is a cause, another is an effect. So every research has independent and dependent variable. So the independent variable is allowed in an experimental group. I think the confusion is experimental group. Let me tell you, see, a number of hours of study by students and marks secured by students, they are related. Okay, number of hours spent by students and mark secured by students, they are related. Whether it is a hypothesis or not.
Yes, sir.
Hypothesis. But what is the variable number of hours you have to take? Girls, you have to control. Boys, whether it influences the ability or the focus in the control.
Yes, sir.
A student, all along in the day he works in the office or works in somewhere else, and in the night he studies for 2 hours. Whether he is equated with a person who has all the luxury, AC, comforts, computer, all availability.
No, sir.
There are so many
Definitely.
variables. If you take only number of hours, you have to say same category of sex, same social background, and their parents, if they are lawyers, all the parents must be lawyers. If their social background must be. So all these things are to be controlled. It's what's called extraneous variable. These variables will influence. If you take number of hours, it appears to be simple. If you say number of hours, whether this number of hours alone is to be taken, then the same sex, same category, same age group, and the same social background, same social setup, same college. Suppose you are studying in the School of Excellence. A student from the remote college, if he studies, whether their number of hours are one and the same.
No,
it's totally different. All these things are to be controlled. That is what we explained, Max-Minikon principle. The extraneous variable, they are variable variables, experimental variable, they are to be controlled. Only the variable which you want to test, allow as experiment, that alone is to be allowed. Otherwise, it's not a good research.
Okay.
Right?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, sir. This
Good
is
afternoon.
Jayavarthi from first year LLM, Constitutional Law Department. sir.
Yeah.
So actually, I wanted to have a suggestion from you, sir, that what will be the advice of you for the beginners of the research, sir? And what's your first time research paper experience? And what's the do's and don'ts that a beginner should do?
Yeah. See, beginners, can I take my illustration? I hail from a small village. Even today, no bus is there, no post office there. I joined in PhD 1980. See, what is important is interest. At present in India, if you want to pursue research, financial condition is not a big problem. If you are a sincere researcher, if you write a UGC NET examination, you will simply get a fellowship. In the law university, in my period, I introduced a provision called University Fellowship. So you can get UGC Fellowship, you can get University Fellowship, and it is. If you know the basic principles of research methodology, you can know it. So my teacher in the 8th standard, he told me 4 important yardsticks for success: interest, perseverance, natural ability, and regular practice. If you have all the 4, you can achieve anything. To be a good researcher, if you have that interest, perseverance, natural ability, and regular practice, all these things will be helpful. So you can achieve. I find in you a very good researcher. That interest is there. You can. But social background, I don't know. But social background, it is manipulable. It is adjustable. You can do it. What's your branch?
Constitutional Law Department.
Yeah, Constitution, wonderful. See, I used to say 34,000 judgments, 2,200 constitutional bench judgment. I require at least 50 more years life to have research. I can say simply 200 PhD works can be done in this work. If you take 25 high courts, compare with the one high court another. 25 high courts, and the history of high courts goes back to 1862. Today we are in 2024, more than 160 years. What material? Lots of materials. Girls, you need not go out. Take a concept, do it, you can. I don't know whether you require any job or not. That's your aspect, but the world is. Let me tell you one thing. Yuval Noah Harari used to say, the future artificial intelligence will take away all the employments. All the employments. Doctors, it will be minimized, role will be minimized. From America, one can do with the help of an artificial intelligence robo an operation in India. An artificial intelligent doctor can diagnose what disease a person is going to have after 5 years. An artificial intelligent doctor is better than 10 doctors. But no artificial intelligence can be equated with an advocate. In India, advocate profession cannot be substituted with artificial intelligence. So we are far, far better. We are a gifted person. So advocates, law students, we are gifted persons. Our future is, it cannot be controlled by any artificial intelligence. Okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for
Thank
the
you.
very impeccable explanation that you've given on regards to the hypothesis topic, sir. Now I respect call upon Ms. Deepa from Business Law Department to render oath of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon to
one and all present here. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this enlightening lecture series. First of all, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Dr. P. Manangamudi sir, former Vice Chancellor, Tamil Nadu Ambedkar Law University, for his inspiring and thought-provoking lecture. Your insight on research methodology have not only deepened our understanding, but also broadened our perspective on this subject. Vice Chancellor, Colonel Professor N.S. Santosh Kumar sir, for your unwavering support and leadership, your vision, support, and empowering both faculties and the students in this academic pursuit. I also extend our appreciation to Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh ma'am, our Register, for your dedication in organizing event and for fostering a culture of inquiry and innovation. I also extend the thanks to Professor Dr. B. Balaji sir, Dean of Academic and Research, for your commitment to academic excellence and your role in facilitating this discussion. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our PG Director, Professor Dr. Kumutaratna ma'am, for her support and guidance throughout this event. I would especially like to thank our esteemed faculty coordinator, Dr. N. Anbarsi ma'am. Your leadership and commitment to our academic community has been invaluable. Finally, a sincere thanks to all participants, both online and the offline, whose engagement and enthusiasm have been the cornerstone of the series. We value your presence and look forward to your continuous involvement and continuous exchange of idea in the future endeavors. Once again, thank you all. Have a good day ahead.